really crazy, I can't believe it exists, affordable capture cards. Are they any good? Let's find out. Hello, welcome back to the channel. I am Sunny of The Sunny Machine. You can check out more about me at thesunnymachine.com. Today, we're going to be talking about capture cards. These little cheap, crazy capture cards. Are they any good? Let's find out. First one I want to kind of just toss out there that I got originally was this plastic looking thing. So if you see this one, I'm going to say avoid it, okay? All of these capture cards are between $7 and about $20, give or take. If you see one that looks like this, it's just this like plastic body housing thing, this is the one I would say you want to try to avoid. It will do an okay job, and if you have one of these, it'll still capture everything that you could possibly throw at it, except it won't do 60 frames per second. Now, there's a caveat to this whole 60 frame per second thing. These two are the more common ones you're going to see these days, and this one is actually a USB-C connection. So I got this one most recently, and it was $6.99. $6.99 for this capture card. Effectively, it is the exact same thing as this. I will have both of these linked below if you are interested. In order to make this one work on a regular USB 3.0 device, you will need an adapter. So they sell these little USB-C to USB 3.0, 2.0 adapters, and that will let you use this. Now, these will say they're USB 3.0, but they are not. They are USB 2.0. All of these devices, even though they have like a blue plug or USB-C plug, it's USB 2.0. When you plug this into OBS as a video capture device, you're going to see it labeled as USB video. Under resolution and FPS type, it will start off by saying default device. You're going to want to set that to custom and put the resolution to 1920 by 1080. The FPS is one we're going to discuss. Now, I'm going to say if you're streaming to Twitch at 48 frames per second, you're going to want to use 48. If you're streaming to Twitch at 30, put it on 30. It does say 60 in the list, but it will not be 60 frames per second. It will be dropping frames. In a bit, we'll do a side-by-side comparison, and I will show you that this is not 60 frames per second. But it will run a steady 48 frames per second. Now, the really nice thing about this capture card is no matter what resolution or frame rate you are feeding the device, it will still work. You can change this resolution to anything, and it is not going to throw you an error. You can feed even a 4K image, a 4K signal to this capture card, and it will still work. So we're going to test everything. I'm going to show you guys everything working, every signal you can throw at it, and some of the limitations and benefits of the device overall. You want the video format to be on MJPEG, color space to be on 709, and color range needs to be either set to full or partial depending on your advanced settings window in OBS. If you want to get audio from this thing, this is the first kind of weakness and caveat and problem with this device. So the audio will not come across into OBS without you manually hooking it up. But there is a secondary problem. If we look at the device, and in here it's going to be called Digital Audio Interface, USB Digital Audio. If I double click on this, and we look at the Advanced tab, you will see we only have one channel available. It will not do stereo audio. I don't know why, but it just doesn't do stereo audio. So this is the first real weakness with this device. Now you can circumvent this by getting an HDMI audio extractor. You can then take the audio out of the HDMI signal and feed it into your motherboard's line-in, or a mixer, or your Go XLR, whatever device that you're using. So that brings the price up on this capture card a bit, but we're still really in a good spot compared to the more expensive capture cards. Now I have an HDMI audio extractor in my setup through the Matrix. If you want to see how I'm doing it, I did a video on the HDMI matrices a few videos back. I'll link that in the description. As you can hear, because I'm running through my mixer with an HDMI audio extractor, I can get the audio to be stereo. If you do want the audio to come through as mono in OBS, what you can do is use custom audio device. Check this little box, and then you got to find that USB digital audio digital interface and click OK. Once you have the USB audio capture in here, you should be able to turn it up and have the mono audio. See, it does show a stereo signal, but it is not in stereo. It will be bouncing up and down. There's a massive difference between that and the audio extractor. But you can get audio this way. If it's in mono and it's no big deal, or you only need like audio from maybe your camera or something, a microphone coming in through the HDMI line, you can do it this way. Now we're going to go through a myriad of tests where I throw a bunch of different kind of signal resolutions and things that other capture cards even have problems with. We're going to go over 240p, 480p, 4K, HDR, all of that stuff. I want to show you what does and does not work and what the quality differences are between a good, more expensive capture card and these really cheap, inexpensive dongle capture cards. Okay, so on the left we've got the Live Gamer 4K, and on the right we've got the $7 capture card. As you can see, the no signal screen on the AverMedia card can be quite annoying, whereas the $7 capture card actually just gives you a black screen when there's no image, which is actually really nice. Some of these capture cards will show color bars when there's no image, and some of them will just be black. So right now we're sending a Dolby Vision signal to both capture cards, and there is no automatic HDR to SDR conversion for Dolby Vision on either of these cards. So what I'm going to do is just apply an HDR to SDR LUT to both capture cards, and this is where we can start to see quite a significant difference in color quality between the two cards. Now the $7 capture card is set to 1080p 60 for this test, so I can show you guys some of the weaknesses with the different frame rate settings on these cards. The basic image input on the $7 capture card, as you can see, looks a little bit, I don't know, off. There's some weird color gradation going on. There's just some weird colors. There's the contrast, the saturation, everything's just kind of not that good. So I'm going to apply just a color correction filter to it, and we're going to try and see if we can get somewhat of a better image out of the capture card. And I suggest playing with a color correction filter just to try to eke out a little bit more image quality out of these cheap capture cards if you do want to use them. So that doesn't look too bad, just for some quick settings. And 1080p 60 looks like it's running okay, but there will be just these random dropped frames on the USB capture card compared to the Live Gamer 4K. It won't stay steady, and you can kind of tell if you look at the Live Gamer 4K image that it's a lot smoother, it keeps up better, and it doesn't hitch at all. And there'll be these like sudden hitches on the $7 capture card at 60 frames per second. Hopefully that's coming across all right on YouTube. So if we go in and we change it from 60 frames per second to 48 on the $7 capture card, yes, the frame rate will be lower, but it's much more stable. It's not dropping frames nearly as much. There's no hitching. And 48 frames per second is a much more visually appealing and bitrate encoder friendly frame rate for your stream. So if you are going to stream to Twitch, this capture card is great because you can get a pretty smooth stream experience, 48 frames per second. Now, you will notice that there is a huge quality difference in the colors and some of the way the game is being rendered on the edges of things. But it is pretty good, let me tell you. There's for $7 or even at $20, this image quality is totally passable. And by the time it gets rendered out to Twitch and encoded, nobody's going to be able to tell you're using one of these cheap capture cards. Nobody's going to mind. Nobody's going to notice. You could totally get away with this. And it can even look really good in certain circumstances. So now let's change to 720p, 60 frames per second. Okay, so now we've got the capture card set to 720p, 60 frames per second. And as you can see, yes, we still got some weird color issues. The quality doesn't quite look as good. But, excuse my poor driving, the frame rate is actually keeping up with the Live Gamer 4K. There's no more hitching. There's no more dropping. There is no more weirdness. So if you could get the color correction settings dialed in properly, you can actually get a pretty good smooth image at 60 frames per second using 720p. But again, I think the higher image quality and the colors that you get out of 1080p are just better on this capture card. So going back to 1080p, 48 frames per second, I'd say this is the happy medium between high quality image and frame rate, especially for streaming. Now, if you want to make sure you're getting the highest quality image possible, this is not the capture card for you. This is just so that you can have a capture card that is working and let you get a signal for recording. Okay, now we're going to move on to a 1440p signal coming from the M Classic. And I've reset all the filters. Our color correction filter is off. There's no LUTs from the Dolby Vision HDR business. This is exactly just straight up the capture cards into OBS. And as you can see, it's not that bad. If we add a color correction filter back to the $7 capture card with just some simple tweaks, we can get it relatively close. The quality is still there. For the rest of these tests, I'm going to leave the settings on 1080p, 48 frames per second. But as you can see, the quality is not terrible. We've got the Live Gamer 4K, which actually seems like it could use a little bit of color correction. And we've got a 1440p signal coming in to both capture cards. If you guys don't know what the M Classic is, the M Classic is an upscaler that will upscale your games to 1080p or 1440p depending on the kind of monitor and devices you have in your setup. And I'm using the M Classic to upscale the Nintendo Switch to 1440p. So if I get zoomed in real close here on Link, the M Classic is sending a clean signal. Now actually, the settings I have on the color corrector for the $7 capture card kind of give it a nicer look than the 4K capture card. The $7 capture card in this instance, though it is a little less saturated, looks a little more pleasing to my eye, which is very interesting. But as you can see, the quality is still very much there. For $7, this capture card is incredible. The image quality isn't perfect, but it is very, very good, considering the price difference between the Live Gamer 4K and a $7 USB no-name capture card. These capture cards are totally worth $7. Alright, now we want to test the different RetroTink 5X outputs. The RetroTink 5X outputs some slightly different resolutions than your standard outputs. So just want to show you that this capture card does work with pretty much everything that we can throw at it. So right now we've got it on 1920 by 1440, which is the RetroTink 1440p output. It does have a 2560 1440, which would match the M Classic. We know that works. Let's try 480p. So this 480p resolution is actually 1920 by 480. It is not your normal 480p output. We will test a regular 480p output in a moment just to show you that it does work. But all the other resolutions, they should all be working. So here we've got 1200p working just fine. And just to show you guys that this is actually working, we'll load up Dino Crisis. And even with scan lines, so let's load into a game. Now you can see that there is a slight bit of latency on the image updating compared to the Live Gamer 4K, but that's really unfair in comparison because the Live Gamer 4K is actually one of the fastest input, has one of the lowest input latencies of all capture cards. So let's do the 480p 480i switching. So the menu here is at 480i and this is at 480p. Now the RetroTink is de-interlacing for us, and I'm just going to spam back and forth as quick as possible, see if we can glitch out the capture card. And nope, looks like it's absolutely fine, keeping up no problem. So now let's put it on frame lock, and when you have the RetroTink 5X set to frame lock, it's now up to the capture card or your TV or whatever device is hooked up to the RetroTink to switch the vertical sync on its own. And as you can see, when I try to switch between the menu and the gameplay, there's a massive delay switching the signal back and forth. So if you're going to be doing this, make sure you have triple buffer on. The capture card, like most capture cards, is going to struggle with frame lock. But if we set it back to triple buffer, it's actually no problem whatsoever. And we can even test the HDR. So we can inject HDR10 into the signal, and as you can see, it will take an HDR signal. It will not do automatic HDR to SDR tone mapping, but it will take the signal, and you can use a LUT to then do the tone mapping on OBS. Alright, now it's finally time to test true 480p and a 240p signal. Alright, so here we have NBA Jam running on a Sega Genesis Model 2 through composite video into a RetroTink 2X Pro running at pass-through, which means we're getting a 240p signal to both capture cards. And as you can see, the Live Gamer 4K has no problem with the 240p signal, and the $7 capture card also has no problem with the 240p signal. And this is where this use case, I think, is pretty significant. These cheap capture cards handle retro resolutions just fine. There's something just kind of nice about the $7 capture card with this 240p image. I can't put my finger on it, but the lower quality nature of the composite signal plus the cheap capture card is pretty good. There's something about it that just feels okay. And it's very hard to put my finger on what the difference is, but this is a really good option if you have retro consoles and a scaler. And in the case of retro consoles, you could just plug the analog audio from the console directly into your line in on your computer, and you don't even need an HDMI audio extractor anymore. So this is just goes to show you that it will handle 240p. I'll switch it over to 480p. Give it a second. It takes a bit longer for it to get the 480p and 240p signals, but once it's hooked, it seems to be fine. And there you go. This is 480p on the Live Gamer 4K and the $7 capture card, working no problem. So if you guys have retro consoles, this might be a good way to go if you need a cheap capture card to get things going. In conclusion, are these cheap little HDMI capture cards worth $20, $7? I think so. I think if you really want to get a capture card for your stream and you don't have the budget for a more expensive internal capture card or external capture card, these guys are a great way to go. They will get you something that will allow you to stream games. These will even capture an HDMI output from laptops and phones and all kinds of things. If it has an HDMI output, it will work. And you won't have to sacrifice things like sending a 4K image to another device with a splitter. You can still send 4K across your matrices and your splitters and all the things in your setup like I am to a 4K capture card and use one of these cheapo capture cards exactly like I did today. If you guys have any comments, any questions, please leave them below. And I also want to say huge shout out and thank you to my supporters on Patreon. If you guys are interested in supporting our community and our channel, the first thing I would suggest is just join the Discord. Go to infinitequality.live and join our community Discord. If you like what we've got going on and you want to support our community and videos like this, then go check out the Patreon. And I'll see you guys in the next one.